For 50 years, my wife never once told me she loved me. Not on our wedding day. Not after we had 4 children. Not even when I was lying on my deathbed at 70. With the little strength I had left, I forced a smile and looked at her. After all these years, did you ever love me? Even for a single day? She froze. She didn't answer, but that hesitation was enough. I already knew the truth. I glanced at the children and grandchildren we had brought into this world, then looked back at the woman I had spent half a century loving, and with my final breath I told her, if I could live my life again, I would never love you. I closed my eyes and died, but when I opened them again, I wasn't 70 anymore. I was 18. I had been given another life, and this time I knew exactly what I was going to do. Stay away from my wife. Her name was Claire, and in my previous life, she had been the woman I loved for 50 years. 3 months before the college entrance exams, Claire suddenly transferred into my class. The moment I saw her walk through the door, my heart sank. No, not again. She looked around the classroom, then walked straight toward me. I instinctively moved my chair away. I wanted as much distance between us as possible, but Claire grabbed me by the collar. Ethan, why did you die so fast? I froze. She stared at me. I hadn't even answered your question yet. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then I looked around the classroom, the students, the teacher, the familiar desks. Everything was exactly as I remembered. This wasn't a dream. I had really gone back to the beginning of everything, and if this second chance had been granted because of my final wish, then I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. In my previous life, Claire's family had run into financial trouble. To secure a partnership with my family, they proposed a marriage between us. Claire was the genius beauty of our school, beautiful, intelligent, and eventually destined to become a world-famous violinist. I was the complete opposite. I was the guy sitting in the back row, barely scraping by academically. I eventually graduated from a mediocre college, joined my father's company, and took over the family business. When my father proposed the marriage, he was thrilled, and so was I, because I genuinely loved Claire. But there was one problem. Claire already had someone she was close to, a childhood friend named Daniel. Her family separated the two of them and forced her to marry me, and after our wedding, Claire never seemed happy. I could give her expensive jewelry, designer bags, everything she could possibly want, but I could never get the one thing I wanted from her, a genuine smile. For 50 years I kept trying, and for 50 years I failed, until I died. So this time I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to fight for her. I wasn't even going to interfere with the partnership between our families, because I knew something they didn't. A few years from now, Claire's family company would become incredibly successful. My family would benefit from that partnership too, so there was no reason to break it. I just didn't need to marry their daughter. This time I had different goals. I would study, get into a good university, and use the 50 years of knowledge I'd brought back with me to fulfill my father's biggest dream, taking our company's products to the international market. So I started studying like my life depended on it. My classmates couldn't believe what they were seeing. Ethan, you don't play basketball anymore? You don't even go play games after school. Are you possessed or something? I ignored them. They had no idea. I had already lived an entire lifetime, and failing to get into a good university had been one of my biggest regrets. I wasn't going to repeat it. Half a month later, my father suddenly called me after school. Come home early. We're having guests tonight. Then he added, and pick up some gifts for a girl. I knew exactly who was coming. Claire. In my previous life, I had spent hours thinking about what to buy her. Since we were still teenagers, I eventually bought her a huge pile of cute gifts. She had looked at them with disgust. Childish. Then she'd coldly told me, I can't imagine how miserable my life will be if I have to spend it with someone like you. This time, I bought even more childish things. RC cars, dolls, toys meant for little kids. I carried several enormous bags home. The moment my father saw them, he winked at me. Then he deliberately pretended to be surprised. Son, it's your first time meeting Claire, and you bought her so many gifts? How come you've never been this thoughtful with your own father? I ignored him. I carried everything into the living room and dumped the bags onto the floor. One of the toy cars even lost a wheel. I looked at Claire. She sat there with the same cold expression I remembered from my previous life. I casually pointed at the toys. My dad told me to buy you something. I was short on time, so I grabbed these from a street stall. If I'd gone to a proper store, the quality would have been better. My father looked like he was about to hit me with the nearest kitchen utensil, but I didn't care. I'd lived to 70 in my previous life. Technically, I was the older man in this room. I dropped onto the sofa and looked at my father. You're a grown adult. Why are you acting so immature? Everyone froze. My father, Claire, her parents, all of them stared at me, but Claire's expression remained cold. She probably thought I was still going to become her husband. She had no idea. I had already decided to walk away from her. My father awkwardly laughed. Well, Ethan and I have a great relationship. We just joke around like this. Claire's parents immediately smiled. They clearly thought everything was going perfectly, but Claire remained completely expressionless. I looked at the mountain of toys scattered across the floor. Since you don't like them, I'll just take them back. I reached down to collect them, but before I could, Claire suddenly grabbed a Barbie doll from my hands. She looked at it and smiled. I froze. She smiled. In 50 years of marriage, I had seen Claire smile countless times at other people, but never at me, and now she was smiling at a cheap Barbie doll. What was going on? Was she really Claire? Had she been possessed? Or did she genuinely like children's toys? I couldn't figure it out, and honestly, I didn't care. I reached for the doll. Sorry, I bought that one for myself. The rest are yours. I expected her to get angry. Instead, she simply held onto the toys, with that faint smile still on her face. I found it completely completely ridiculous. In my previous life, I'd bought her jewelry worth millions. She barely looked at it. Now a cheap toy made her happy. Dinner soon began. Our parents kept trying to push us together, but I remained completely indifferent. I already knew Claire's family believed she was supposed to marry me, and I also knew about Daniel, her childhood friend, the guy she'd supposedly loved since they were young. In my previous life, I'd always believed her family had torn them apart because of the arranged marriage. So this time, I decided to do the opposite. I would step aside, let Claire be with the person she wanted, and stay completely out of her life. Eventually, it was nearly midnight. Claire's family finally prepared to leave. My father dragged me to the door to see them off. Then Claire suddenly stopped. I forgot my backpack. It was still sitting on the sofa. My father immediately looked at me. "Ethan, go get it." I reluctantly walked back inside. I grabbed the backpack and handed it to Claire. She looked at me, then quietly said, "Thank you." I froze for half a second. Thank you? In both of my lifetimes, I had known this woman, and this was somehow the first time she'd ever thanked me like that. I didn't respond. I simply turned around and walked back to my room. Behind me, I heard my father desperately trying to smooth things over. "He's just been in a bad mood lately. He's normally not like this. Please don't let this affect the partnership between our families." I ignored them. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I went to school as usual. Halfway through class, our homeroom teacher suddenly announced, "We have a new transfer student." The classroom door opened, and the moment I saw who walked in, I nearly stopped breathing. Claire. She had transferred into my school. The teacher introduced her and immediately pointed toward the front row. "Claire, you can sit beside the class president. He was the top student in the entire school." It made perfect sense, but Claire shook her head. Then she walked straight toward me. She stopped beside my desk and smiled. "We meet again." She pointed at the empty seat beside me. "Can I sit here?" I stared at her. Was she serious? Before I could answer, she asked again, "Ethan, can I sit next to you?" The entire class was watching. Even the teacher looked confused. He hurried over. "Claire, Ethan is the worst student in this class. You should sit with the class president. He's ranked first in the entire school. You can study together and help each other." I wasn't offended, because he was right. In high school, I was a complete slacker, but Claire didn't care. She smiled politely. "Thank you, sir, but I'll sit with Ethan. We know each other." The teacher frowned. Then he looked directly at me. "Don't drag down her grades. Claire was one of the best students in the entire city. In my previous life, she had ranked third in the college entrance exams, and I knew exactly why. The arranged marriage had destroyed her focus. She'd been separated from Daniel, and her grades suffered because of it. This time, I wanted none of that. I wanted Claire to have the future she deserved. So I reached over and blocked the empty chair with my arm. "I prefer sitting alone." Claire stared at me. "We barely know each other. You only met me yesterday, so go sit somewhere else." The classroom went completely silent. No one expected me to reject the school's most beautiful girl. Claire looked stunned. For a moment, I thought she'd actually leave. Instead, bang! She slammed her backpack onto the desk. Then she knocked my hand away. "You don't own this seat. I'll sit wherever I want." I stared at her. That attitude, that exact expression. For 50 years I'd known it all too well, and seeing it again made my stomach turn. I slammed my book onto the desk. Claire flinched. "Fine. Sit wherever you want. I can't stop you." I grabbed my bag. Then I looked around the classroom. There was another empty desk near the trash can. It was basically a storage table covered in junk. Perfect. I moved there. I shoved the junk aside, dropped my bag onto the desk, grabbed my basketball, and walked toward the back row. The other slackers immediately followed me. We left the classroom together. Behind us, the teacher was shouting furiously, but I didn't care. For once, I was exactly where I wanted to be, away from Claire. We played basketball the entire morning. By noon, I was exhausted and ready to buy some ice water. Then suddenly, someone walked toward me. A bottle appeared in my hands. I looked down. It was Claire. "Here, it's not cold. You shouldn't drink ice water right after exercising." My friends immediately started laughing. "Damn, Ethan. Didn't know you had this much game. She's even bringing you room temperature water." I glared at them. "Shut up." Then I looked back at Claire. My expression turned cold. "No thanks. I prefer ice water." She looked surprised. I continued. "Claire, listen carefully. Our families can keep their business partnership, but forget about the arranged marriage. I know you have someone you like, and I'm not interested in you. There is no reason for us to get to know each other. I'll talk to my father myself. This is better for both of us." I pushed the bottle back into her hands, then walked away. I thought that would finally make her understand. I was wrong, because when I reached the bus stop, I heard someone running behind me. I turned around. Claire was coming straight toward me. Her face was pale. She grabbed my arm. I tried to pull away, but suddenly, her grip tightened. She pushed me against the bus stop sign, then grabbed my shoulders with both hands. Her eyes were filled with anger and tears, and she whispered, "Ethan." I stared at her. Then she said something that made my entire mind go blank. "Don't think you're the only one who got reborn." My mind went completely blank. Claire had been reborn too. She looked straight into my eyes. "I'm your wife. In our 50 years of marriage, you couldn't even bear to raise your voice at me. But in this life, tell me, how many times have you yelled at me since yesterday?" I stared at her. Tears were already gathering in her eyes. She really was Claire, the same woman I'd spent 50 years with. But everything she'd done since yesterday was completely different. The smile, the toys, the thank you, following me to school. bringing me water. None of it made sense, but I didn't want to understand. If we'd both been given another chance, then we should use it to fix our own regrets. Claire had spent her previous life being separated from the person she believed she loved, and I had spent mine loving a woman who, at least from my perspective, never loved me back. My father had worked himself to death building the family company. I had never fulfilled his final dream of taking our products overseas, and I had died with an entire lifetime of regrets. So I looked at Claire. Since you've been reborn too, that's perfect. In this life, I won't get in the way of you and your childhood sweetheart. You don't have to marry me just to help your family's business. Our families have worked together before, and you know my father and I aren't the kind of people who hold grudges. Besides, you were incredibly successful in our previous life. With everything you remember, you can build that future again without my family. I took a breath. I'd loved this woman for 50 years. Even after everything, letting go still hurt. Goodbye, Claire. I turned around. But before I could take another step, a loud engine suddenly roared toward us. A flashy scooter stopped right in front of Claire. The rider took off his sunglasses and grinned. Claire, I'm here to pick you up. Why did you transfer schools anyway? Now I have to drive an extra half hour just to pick you up every day. I recognized him immediately. Daniel, Claire's childhood friend. The man I'd spent 50 years believing was the love of her life. His family owned an electronics factory. They'd once been quite successful, but the business had started struggling. Daniel's father eventually stopped paying much attention to him, so Daniel started hanging around with delinquents and riding around on that ridiculous scooter. But there was one thing I remembered. He had always treated Claire well. He never dragged her into his bad habits, and that was exactly why I'd always believed she couldn't let him go. I had no reason to get involved. I glanced at him, then walked away. Behind me, I heard Claire stomping her feet. Ethan, you bastard. I kept walking. When I reached the intersection, I stopped for the traffic light. Then, almost against my will, I looked back. Claire was getting onto Daniel's scooter. I looked up at the blazing midday sun. It was so bright that my eyes started watering. I wiped my face. So this was the truth. I had spent 50 years believing that love would eventually make her choose me. I had supported her, protected her, built a family with her, and now that we'd both been given another chance, she still chose him. I laughed bitterly. Supporting each other through thick and thin. Guess that was all just something I told myself. I went home. Then I took several days off school. I didn't want to see Claire. My father was furious, but he couldn't force me. My mother had died when I was young, and I was his only son. He'd always spoiled me. After several days, I finally told him, I want to transfer schools. My father stared at me. The college entrance exams are almost here. Why would you transfer now? Then his expression changed. Is this because of Claire? She transferred all the way here just to be with you. If you leave, what is she supposed to do? I waved my hand impatiently. When did I ever agree to marry her? I already told you. I don't like her, and she already has someone she likes. You can't force two people to fall in love. My father tried to argue. I looked toward the balcony. If you keep forcing me, I'll jump off this third-floor balcony and go join Mom. My father immediately went pale. Fine. Just calm down. I'll contact some schools for you. I smiled. That was my dad, always giving in to me. I looked at him seriously. Don't worry. Once I transfer, I'll get into a good university. I'll study finance, and I'll come back and help you build the company. Mom will be watching over us. My father was so moved that he hugged me and cried. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Unfortunately, my father betrayed me the very next day. I was still sleeping when my bedroom door suddenly swung open. I slowly opened my eyes and nearly jumped out of bed. Claire was standing in my room. She walked straight to the window, then pulled the curtains open. Sunlight flooded the room. I covered my eyes. Claire, are you crazy? This is my house. What the hell are you doing in my room? She looked at me calmly. Your house? Your room. Then she smiled. I lived here for 50 years, so this is my house too. I froze. Before I could respond, she opened my closet, then started pulling out my clothes, even my underwear. I stared at her in disbelief. Claire, are you insane? She rubbed her chin and looked me over. So you've always slept like this? Get out. She smiled. Make me. Then she stepped closer. What are you going to do? I kept you in line for 50 years. Did you really think being reborn would let you escape me? My anger exploded. That same domineering attitude, that same confidence, it brought back every memory I'd spent decades trying to forget. Claire, acting like this will only make me hate you. She froze. I ignored her. I got dressed and walked toward the door. But suddenly, she hugged me from behind. Her arms tightened around me. Her voice trembled. Ethan, I'm sorry. There was one question I never answered in our previous life. I'll answer it now. I immediately pulled her hands away. You don't need to. I already know the answer. I loved you for 50 years, and I couldn't move your heart, so please, just let me go. I turned toward her. In this life, can we just be strangers who know each other well? We're only 18. We have our whole lives ahead of us. Eventually, you'll forget the man you never loved. You had regrets in your previous life. So did I. Let's spend this life fixing our own regrets. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. No, you're my husband. After 50 years together, can you really just throw all of that away? My chest tightened. If I said it didn't hurt, I'd be lying. But I couldn't repeat the same mistake. I can let you go. Claire wiped her tears. Then her expression became completely serious. I know you don't believe me. In our previous life, you treated me well for 50 years. So in this life, it's my turn to treat you well for 50 years. I stared at her. I didn't believe a word, because sooner or later, I was sure she'd go running back to Daniel, and I had no intention of waiting around to find out. My father was already waiting downstairs. The moment he saw Claire and me walking walking down together. His face lit up. "Come on, you two, I made breakfast." I didn't even answer. I grabbed a steamed bun and walked straight out the door. A second later, I heard footsteps behind me. Claire. I walked faster. She walked faster. I stopped. She stopped. It was driving me insane. And this continued for half a month. Everywhere I went, Claire followed. When I played basketball, she sat nearby in the sun and waited for me. When I went to the internet cafe, she booked the computer right beside mine and watched movies. Even when I went to the bathroom, she waited outside. The entire school was talking about it. Nobody could understand why the school's top student was spending every waking moment following the biggest slacker in class. Some people even started saying I must be some secret rich heir, and Claire was trying to secure herself a wealthy husband. I ignored all of it. Claire didn't care either. She just kept following me every single day until one Friday, she didn't show up. For the first time in weeks, I had peace and quiet. I thought maybe she'd finally given up. Classes ended. Still no Claire. Since it was the last Friday of the month, we had a 2-day break. Some of my friends from other classes invited me out for dinner. With graduation approaching, we knew we'd soon all be going our separate ways, so I agreed. We ate at a cheap food stall until nearly 10 at night. Afterward, we stood by the road trying to hail a taxi. Then one of my friends suddenly slapped my shoulder. "Ethan, look over there. Isn't that your goddess?" I turned, and my heart sank. Across the street, Claire was walking out of a hotel, and beside her was Daniel. They were talking and laughing together. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then Claire looked up. She saw me. Her smile disappeared instantly. She rushed toward me. Daniel followed behind her. I looked at Claire, then at the hotel, then back at her. I gave a cold laugh. "We haven't even graduated yet, and you're already this impatient? Stringing me along while booking a hotel room with your childhood sweetheart?" Her face turned pale. "Ethan, listen to me. Enough. Didn't I already tell you? God gave you another chance, so go be with the man you supposedly love. Why do you keep following me?" A taxi pulled up beside us. I raised my hand. The door opened. I got inside. Claire reached toward me. "Ethan." I shut the door. "Drive." The taxi pulled away. I stared out the window. I told myself I didn't care, that I'd already made my decision, that this was exactly what I wanted, but a tear still slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away before the driver could notice. When I got home, I went straight to my father. "Dad, I want to take a trip." He looked at me. "You're leaving now? I'll come back before the exams." He could see from my expression that something was wrong, but he didn't ask. He simply nodded. The next morning, I bought a plane ticket. I wasn't going somewhere random. I was going somewhere my mother had always dreamed of visiting, the coast. Before she died, my mother had always wanted to see the ocean, so I took her urn with me and flew away. I traveled through several coastal cities. Eventually, I arrived in Shanghai, my mother's hometown. She had once left this city because she fell in love with my father. And although she was gone now, my father had never forgotten her. Even our family's cosmetics company had products inspired by her. That was why my father had always dreamed of taking those products to the international market. I sat alone on the beach at dusk, holding my mother's urn. The sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of me. For the first time in weeks, I finally felt quiet inside. Not far away, a mother and her teenage son were sitting together. The boy looked around my age. He was crying. "Mom, why doesn't the girl I like love me? Is there really anyone in this world who could ever like me?" His mother gently patted his head, then smiled. "Silly boy, when I first met you, I was just a girl in my 20s. I froze. Those words hit something deep inside me. My eyes began to burn. Then the tears came. I looked down at my mother's urn. "Mom, what did I do wrong? I loved her for 50 years. 50 years. Was her heart really made of stone? Does someone like me really not deserve to be loved?" My voice broke. "Mom, I miss you." I hugged the urn tightly. Tears poured down my face. And then, I heard another crying voice beside me. I froze. A pair of hands reached toward my mother's urn. Then a familiar voice whispered, "Mom, don't worry. In this life, I'll take good care of Ethan." I slowly turned around. My heart stopped. It was Claire. She was holding my mother's urn with both hands. Her face was covered in tears. Before I could say anything, she threw her arms around me. "Ethan, please, give me one chance. Just listen to me. After I'm finished, if you still want to leave me, I promise I'll never bother you again." She wiped her tears, then looked directly into my eyes. "I've been trying to tell you the truth. You've always believed I loved Daniel, but you're wrong. I never loved him." I stared at her, then explained. Emily took a shaky breath. "Daniel and I grew up together. That's true, but I never loved him." I stared at her. "Then why did you spend so much time with him?" "I never said I wanted him." "Who told you that?" I couldn't answer, because the truth was, I had never actually asked her. In my previous life, I simply assumed. I assumed she loved Daniel. I assumed her parents had torn them apart. And I assumed marrying me was the reason she was miserable. Emily wiped her tears. "In our previous life, I didn't like you at first. Not because there was someone else, because I hated being treated like a business deal. Our families wanted an alliance, and I felt like I was being sold to you, so I became cold. Every time you tried to get close to me, I pushed you away." I lowered my eyes. That part, I remembered. But then Emily said something that made me look up. "After I became pregnant, didn't you notice I started changing?" I froze. She continued. "When you asked me for a divorce, I refused. Do you really think I refused because I wanted to trap you? I was just being stubborn. I didn't know how to tell you what I was feeling." Her voice trembled. "Because by then, I had already fallen in love with you." My mind went blank. Emily looked away. Our family's companies became bigger and bigger. I had responsibilities everywhere, and I was still performing overseas. Sometimes I came home completely exhausted. All I wanted was to sleep. She looked back at me. "So when you bought me expensive jewelry, I didn't care about it, but there was something you never noticed." I frowned. "What?" "The ring. And the bracelet. You remember them? them? I slowly shook my head. They were the first things you ever bought me. Those cheap little pieces from that street stall. My eyes widened. She smiled through her tears. I wore those for decades, not the millions worth of jewelry you bought afterward. Those two things, those were the ones I treasured. Suddenly, memories began flashing through my mind. All those years, I'd seen her wearing them, but I'd never understood why. I had assumed she simply didn't care about the expensive gifts. I never realized she was wearing the first things I'd ever given her. Emily took a deep breath. After 50 years together, even a stone would eventually warm up. How could I possibly remain indifferent to you? I couldn't speak. Then she looked directly into my eyes. On your deathbed, when you asked me if I'd ever loved you, I hesitated. My chest tightened. I thought you hesitated because you didn't love me. Emily shook her head. No, I hesitated because I didn't know how to say it. Her voice broke. I was trying to figure out how to tell you that I loved you. Tears streamed down her face again, but you died before I could say it. She clenched her fists against my chest. Who told you that you could die so quickly? How could you die without my permission? I stared at her. She was crying harder now. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you that I loved you. That I really, really loved you. She pressed her forehead against my chest. Emily, love you, Ryan. The day you died, I cried the entire night, and when I finally fell asleep, I woke up and found myself 18 again. Emily looked up at me. In this life, I wasn't going to wait for you anymore. I was going to come to you. But you kept yelling at me. You kept looking at me like you hated me. She punched my chest weakly. Do you know how much that hurt? I remained silent. Then she said something that made my heart sink. You think you were the only one who was tired in that marriage? I gave you 2 sons, 2 daughters. I helped you manage the Yang family business, and I carried all of that while building the Lee family into what it became. Her tears kept falling. Couldn't you just have understood me a little? She finally broke down completely, and then she threw herself into my arms. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I didn't push her away. I just stood there, holding the woman I'd spent 50 years loving, and suddenly, I started remembering things I'd deliberately forgotten. She had been cold to me, but she had never abandoned our family. When the Lee family became an industry giant, she never forgot to help my family's company grow with them. She had supported our children, supported our business, supported our entire family. Maybe I'd spent 50 years staring at the one thing she didn't give me, and completely missed everything she did. I slowly raised my hand, and gently patted her back. Emily, calm down. She looked up at me through her tears, but there was still one question left. The hotel. I couldn't forget what I'd seen. Then, what about that night? Emily froze. The hotel. What were you doing there with Daniel? Emily wiped the tears from her face. Then she looked straight at me. That night at the hotel, it wasn't what you thought. I stayed silent. She continued. Daniel's grandparents came from the countryside. They were visiting him, but his house didn't have enough room for them to stay. So I helped him book a hotel room. Daniel just came along with me. That's all. I stared at her. You're telling me nothing happened? Nothing. Daniel and I have always been friends. We grew up together, but I've never had romantic feelings for him. I still couldn't completely believe it. In my previous life, I'd spent decades carrying that doubt in my heart. I'd always heard that Emily's parents had separated her from her childhood sweetheart and forced her to marry me, but I'd never actually asked her whether it was true. I'd simply believed the story. Emily noticed my hesitation. Without saying another word, she pulled out her phone. Then she made a call. Get over here. Right now. A few minutes later, someone suddenly appeared from behind a nearby trash can. It was Daniel. He hurried over. Emily. She grabbed my arm and pulled me closer. Then she pointed at me. Call him brother-in-law. Daniel looked terrified. He glanced at me, then at Emily, and immediately said, brother-in-law. I almost laughed. This was the so-called childhood sweetheart I'd spent 50 years being jealous of? Emily crossed her arms. Tell him the truth. Daniel scratched his head. Honestly, I've always thought of Emily as an older sister. That's it. I stared at him. Then why were you always together? Because she was the only person who could keep me in line. Daniel sighed. My parents barely disciplined me. If Emily hadn't kept an eye on me, I would have probably become a real street thug. Then he revealed something I never expected. Daniel already had someone he liked. A girl from a family that owned a nearby KTV. They'd grown up together too, and they'd already promised each other they'd get married once they were old enough. I suddenly remembered something from my previous life. Daniel had eventually married that exact girl. Her father had refused to accept him at first. He thought Daniel was a useless delinquent. So Daniel actually went back to school, worked hard, and managed to get into a decent second-tier university. Only then did her father finally approve of their relationship. Everything suddenly clicked. The rumors I'd believed for 50 years had been completely wrong. Emily wasn't secretly in love with Daniel. She never had been. I had simply misunderstood everything. I looked at Emily. For years, I thought she was the woman who never loved me. But now I realized, maybe she had loved me all along. She just didn't know how to say it. Emily took a deep breath. Then she looked at me seriously. Ryan, in this life, I'm not going to play the violin anymore. I froze. She continued. I've already wasted enough time on things that weren't important. This time, I want to help you fulfill your father's dream. I want to take our family's cosmetics and bring them to the global market. She stepped closer. Ryan, will you give me that chance? I looked at her. The woman in front of me was the same woman I'd spent 50 years loving, but somehow, she felt completely different now. Or maybe, I was finally seeing the woman she'd always been. I smiled. For the first first time in what felt like forever, my heart felt light. I stood up and picked up my mother's urn. Then I started walking toward the hotel. After a few steps, I realized Emily wasn't following. I turned around. She was standing there completely frozen, so I called out, "Come on, let's go back to the hotel. It's freezing out here. Don't catch a cold." Her eyes instantly lit up. She ran toward me, then grabbed my arm and rested her head against my shoulder. For once, I didn't pull away, but before we could take another step, Daniel suddenly jogged over. "Wait." Emily looked annoyed. "What now?" He scratched his head awkwardly. "My ID isn't old enough to book a room. You two have a room, but what am I supposed to do?" Emily pointed toward a bridge in the distance. "There's your room. Go sleep under the bridge." She smiled mischievously. "Tonight is the most important night for me and your brother-in-law. You're on your own." Daniel's face went pale, and for the first time, I couldn't help laughing. Maybe this second life really was going to be different. I'd already loved this woman for 50 years, so what was another 50?